as soon as it stops. Okay, we're live. It says you are live. Hello! Hello, friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sarah, Terry, Amanda, Lisa, Amy. You guys are awesome. Hi, Kim. Welcome, welcome. Happy Sunday afternoon for most of us. I think everybody. Still afternoon. Hope you guys are doing well, having a wonderful weekend. And I'm really excited that we can chat about mere Christianity yet again with these lovely ladies. And we're going to dive right in because I have dinner plans. So we're gonna keep it moving today, so that we can get a good conversation in and also not make me late for my dinner. So why don't you guys that are up on screen with me say hello and yeah. How's your weekend been? Something fun that you've done this weekend? Or cozy or relaxing or whatever. Danny, we'll start with you.
Ooh. Yeah, so this weekend's been great, I guess. I've been doing a lot of reading. I'm participating in the BookTube prize. And I have 3 books left to read.
Yikes.
So there's 6 books that you have to read, and I have 3 left, and it's due next weekend. So that's what I've been doing.
Word.
So yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's been my all of my extra time goes to BookTube prize.
Yeah.
So but I was lucky enough to find one of them on audio, so that was fantastic because that's really a struggle since they're all new books. But just a reading weekend.
Yeah. Cool. Rainey, how has your weekend been?
It's been pretty good. It's been very warm. So I spent some time outside on my deck after I took some Benadryl because otherwise it would have been painful.
Man.
There are so many of those little tree things on my patio, and they just kept falling on my head the whole time. But still, it was nice to read outside while my sinuses could.
Gotta love the spring.
Yes.
Yeah. Kelly, what's been a highlight of your weekend so far?
I just can't even remember what I did this weekend. I mean, other than read this. I read it twice. I listened to it once and read it physically. But like my brain's not working. Hopefully I can have coherent thoughts because my daughter decided to wake up screaming 3 times last night. So we'll see how my brain works.
Boy.
And Becca?
We had my daughter's senior awards night this weekend. And then, graduation next weekend. So,
wow.
Bittersweet.
Oh,
I bet.
Exciting.
Yeah, very cool.
How did she? Oh, that's really exciting.
No, go ahead. Did she get any awards, Becca? What were some of her?
Well, she goes to a vocational school for exercise science, so they have a separate night from her regular high school. So they like the Technical Honor Society and things like that.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah.
Nice. That's really cool.
That's cool.
I had a really wonderful weekend. It's spring, so there's flowers everywhere in California, and I'm really enjoying that. I've been working on daily vlogging for the first time but my daily vlog for yesterday has not gone up yet, so I'm not doing very well. But I got to go to church today, so yay! I'm just really thankful. It's still such a novelty because I wasn't able to go for so long because I am immunocompromised, so I really couldn't go during COVID.
Right. Nice. We just lifted our mask mandate at church too. So it's so nice to like see people's smiles. Like our church has been open, but it's been mandatory to have a mask on the whole time, like even sitting like the whole time. So it's been nice. It was nice today to actually see people's faces. And, oh look, you do have teeth.
Yeah.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, we are going to dive right in. There are 12 chapters in this section. Some we will talk about more than others, but we're getting into kind of like more nitty gritty about what does it mean to be a Christian and how does that affect how we behave, really, our behavior and the values that we hold. And so, yeah, let's just jump right in. Christy has summaries for some chapters and not others.
Yeah. Sorry, there was a lot.
There was a lot. But it kind of like it starts broad and then gets more specific as it goes through this section. So some of those where it gets a little more specific, we won't spend as much time on them, but I love the broad concepts of morality and what does that mean. And he really outlines this chapter so well. Yeah. Anyways, Christy, why don't do you have one for chapter 1?
Yes, I do. Haha. Okay.
Yay.
Okay, so for chapter 1, the 3 parts. Oh, look, you have a banner. Very cool. Okay.
Well, it's just
chapter 1.
General.
Okay. Good job. All right. Yay for organization. Chapter 1, the 3 parts of morality. So God created us and he knows how we run best. His rules are the best morality. Humans can see 3 levels of morality. Play nice together, keep your nose clean, and get right with God. But we can rarely agree on any except the first, play nice together. Even though all 3 are essential for humanity's ultimate purpose. End.
Nice.
End summary.
Nice. Well done.
Good job.
We lost it.
Yeah, Becca. She'll be back, I'm sure.
Okay.
It happened. I took a lot of notes in this section. Well, let's just go through what kinds of things stood out to you in this chapter.
Well, I think it was unique how not unique, that's not the word I'm looking for. I think it's interesting that this section starts out with more of that gray matter, where he's trying to help us understand that there is a lot of gray here, and we're not all going to agree on a lot of this material that's coming up. And he starts us off with that, morality, because we immediately think about our ideals, the way we want things to be. And what I want things to be is going to be different from the next person and the next person and the next person. So I like that he started this section, because a lot of what we see in this section is that gray area where we have to decide what is it that we have learned to understand and what are we supposed to understand.
Underlined at the beginning was when people say, wrong, it doesn't hurt anyone else. It doesn't do any harm. And I hear somebody say,
Rainey, you're breaking up a little bit.
No, it only hurt you. Or that, it's only affecting you. And that doesn't mean you can get a candy bar from a store and you don't think it hurt anybody. Well, yeah, but it did hurt that business, and like, I don't know. That's a soapbox I could always get on, but
you may need to hold the microphone part of your headphone, because you were breaking up a little bit when you were talking.
Oh no! Oh goodness! Hold on.
We heard bits and pieces, but not the whole thing. Sorry. That's okay. I loved the image of the ship that I think who just mentioned it, Amy. I mean, you talked about the ships a couple different times on here, where in regards to those 3 aspects of morality is concerned with like relationship, or in relation with other people, and then within ourselves, and then also with a sense of purpose. And if you compare that to the ship, like you can take care, like the ship floating along with a fleet of other ships, that's important, how it's going to work together with other ships, but also keeping your own ship in working order and clean and And then if those two things are going well, it doesn't make a difference if you're going in the wrong direction. So you have to have that purpose, and that's that third aspect, like how we relate with God, the purpose that He gives us. So I loved it. It clicked in my brain when I read that ship analogy. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a cool way to think of it. Or like the music as well. Music is another illustration that he uses quite a bit throughout the book, but you can play the right notes and you can play in a band, but if you're all playing a different tune, like, yeah.
Yeah. The one
I like those too.
The quote that I really loved is the one that Sarah put in the comments, which was towards the end, where it's like, you cannot make men good by law, but without good men, you cannot have a good society. So it's like,
yeah,
it's kind of like what Rainey was saying, that like, you have to be good to other people, but if you're not like good with yourself inside, or good inside, then it's not going to be a good society.
I loved his like, I put haha in my margins quite a bit when he's talking about the ships. What's the good of telling the ships how to steer as to avoid collisions, if in fact they're such crazy old tubs that they can't be steered at all?
Yeah.
So funny.
Yeah, I had that quote about you cannot make men good by law also highlighted and underlined.
Yeah. I have exclamation points next to it in mine.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, so true.
Do you think when he was starting to write this out, he was just like, how many analogies and metaphors can I put into one speech?
Right.
I can't just say what I mean. I have to like explain it with an image of some kind and let them understand it that way.
Yeah. And then also,
it's great.
I love his illustrations though. It helps me. Towards the end too, in talking about that third aspect of morality, which is like your relationship with your creator. I thought of that verse, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which He ordained for us. I just should have looked it up to have it exactly, but because it said, if somebody else made me for His own purpose, then I shall have a lot of duties which I should not have had if I simply belonged to myself. So because we are created by God, there are aspects of our life and actions which will be different, because we were created by Him for a purpose and not just willy-nilly or not our own selves. I like that one too.
That tenet, that quote that you were saying, the one that Beautiful Manisha was just saying, that always reminds me of when people keep quoting the "my body, my choice" thing for like masking up and stuff like that. It's like, do you guys know that you're quoting that's like an abortion thing that people are saying, that people use for abortion? That is not a thing that you could say if you are a tenant in your body. It's not your body, your choice.
Yeah. I love this too. Tiffany also says Jesus used parables too. That helped people to understand this broader picture of kingdom things that Jesus was talking about. He knew people couldn't understand it if he were to just speak about the kingdom of God. So he used all of these parables over and over and over, so many different parables, to help people understand. So C.S. Lewis is just taking a leaf out of Jesus's book.
And I'm glad he did.
I'm glad too.
It also makes sense because this was on the air, and Jesus, most of his teachings would have been speaking. It's not like he was writing stuff down. So it's like when you do metaphors, when you're talking, it's like so much easier because people aren't getting to reread anything. So they can oh, okay, now I can put together what you just said with this picture in my mind.
Yeah. Nice.
I wonder if we should move on, because I feel like
yeah,
we've already spent a lot
of time. The next chapter. Well, I feel like the first couple are going to take a little bit longer, but yeah, let's move on to chapter 2, cardinal or pivotal virtues. Christy, do you have a summary for chapter 2?
I do.
Oh, go ahead,
yes.
Rainey, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, I like how he is putting in old meanings of words in these chapters so that we don't actually have to go and look them up or just assume that we know what they mean.
Yes. It's so nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing from the last chapter. I think somebody also said it maybe, and it just reminded me when I read it. It said, nothing but the courage and unselfishness of individuals is ever going to make any system work properly. Without good men, you cannot have a good society. I'm pretty sure somebody said that in the chat, but I just love that he uses words like courage and unselfishness, and Rainey, of course, just mentioned that. I just love it. Also, Rainey, is that your couch behind you? It's so pretty. Yes. It looks so leathery and pretty. And
it's not leather at all. It is.
Oh my gosh!
It is. Fabric.
What is it? Oh my gosh!
Just pretty gray fabric.
It's gray? Oh my gosh.
That's a blanket on there.
Oh, this
Christy,
is a blanket.
You're seeing that?
This is a blanket, Christy.
Oh, that's what I was seeing. Yes. Okay. Man, I was like, Rainey, you're like
skin.
Wow.
Me and my luxurious.
You didn't tell me you were rich. Like living the highlights over there in Pennsylvania. Okay.
Anyway,
chapter 2. Anyways, sorry.
Chapter
I just had
2.
to comment on your luxurious
I'm glad you
setting.
I love it.
The cardinal virtues. The subject of human morality has also been discussed in terms of the 7 virtues, 4 cardinal that all civilizations recognize, and 3 theological that only Christians recognize. Lewis here discusses the 4 cardinal virtues and how God wants us to not only be able to accomplish them, but to be able to be virtuous, because that is how we will be happiest in heaven. So yes, he goes into the 7 virtues, and this is where he gets like more deeply into like a more complicated illustration than the ships. I don't know if you guys remember him talking about that.
I love the quote that Sarah just said too. This is maybe my favorite quote of this whole book. He wants a child's heart, but a grown-up head. Like he doesn't want us to stay children in our brains. Like he wants, it's a constant. And I think this theme goes throughout these chapters as well. Like it's a constant learning and a constant growing, and every choice that we make either makes us more like Christ or like a heavenly creature, which we'll get into later, a heavenly creature or a hellish creature. And every choice we make puts us in towards one of those 2 things. But so it's a constant learning and growing thing.
I like that he also added in that part that he does, to be a Christian, you're not expected to be an expert in order to become one. You know, you come as you are, and then the learning happens.
Oh no!
Oh, right in the middle.
Oh man! Oh no!
Well, going along with what Becca was saying, I like
Go
the
ahead,
part where
Kelly.
he specifies how like that there are people that are born maybe with mental not as many mental faculties as others, but that you're just coming with what you have. So he's gonna love you no matter what scale of intelligence you have, but you're using the intelligence that you were given, the level of intelligence you're given. Right. I thought that was great. So it's not saying everyone has to be like perfectly intelligent.
Amy says, adding suspense to the live show.
Now continue, Becca.
Finish the thought. I'll give the first part, then I'll go away, and then you finish what you think I was going to say. Talk amongst yourselves.
Your own adventure.
Oh, that's so annoying. Our internet apparently is not happy today. You do the learning when you're walking the Christian walk. You don't have to be an expert when you come, when he's talking about common sense and prudence, and growing. His expectation is that wherever you start, you don't stay there. And I like that part about, sometimes I think people feel like to become a Christian, I have to have it all together. And that's not what it's about. It's about come where you are and, grow from where you are.
Yeah, definitely. I connected with the section on temperance too. And I kind of feel like we've heard this, do everything but in moderation or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I love the line, but going the right length and no further, which is what temperance is. Whatever that right length is for you and no further. And for me, for a long time, this is exactly why I stopped having cable in my house, because I found myself coming home from work and 4 hours later, 5 hours later, getting up from the couch to go to bed. And like, what did I even watch? I didn't care about anything that was just, what I mean? Like, I had no ability to limit myself with cable. I was living by myself and I didn't have much of a life at the time. And I just was watching hours and hours and hours of shows that I didn't care about. So I stopped my cable, and then I went like 12 years, I think, or more without cable. Like, it was just something that I did for myself to limit that. But I think, and that's not like on a spiritual level, but maybe it is, right? Like that virtue of, or not virtue, but virtue of temperance.
Yeah.
That's how
you were going to
itself out in one way in my mind. Right. I was doing it to excess. And it's not like incredibly harmful to sit for 4 hours and watch TV, but I could have been doing a lot of other things during that time, and I wasn't.
Right. That's what I have to tell myself sometimes when I'll kind of do the same thing. Like, I'll watch a lot of BookTube or something, and I'll just sit there like for hours and just, it's kind of like my TV. And I'll be like, you know what you could have been doing this entire time? Reading the 10 books that you have to read, or doing something that's like a little bit more beneficial. I mean, I love watching BookTube because like most of the time they're my friends, so I want to support them. But at the same time, it's like, you do have that watch later list that you can put it on there. You don't have to watch it right now.
I put a little ha in the section here where I believe he's talking about temperance, and he talks about how a woman who devotes all her thoughts to clothes or bridge or her dog.
You know, right?
Oh, boy.
I was laughing so hard because I was like, but I love Dwight, because I am a little bit crazy about my own dogs, but I'm just imagining like what he's imagining is the woman with the dog in the purse and walking around with the dog, and nothing else matters except that dog.
That's so funny.
I laugh out loud. I'm like, really? It's come down to this.
That's so funny.
You'd need a pretty big purse for Dwight, though.
Oh my God.
That's so funny.
I loved how succinct this chapter was. Each section, I mean, for these virtues, so he really dives into 3 of them, and the chapter really is only about 5 or 6 pages long. So when he brings all 3 of these topics up, he explains them very successfully, in the sense that they're like one-liners and then a brief example. And in those like 3 lines, you know exactly what he's talking about. And even in your own mind, you can imagine examples in your own life where you're like, oh my gosh, exactly. That's I completely understand that. Yeah.
I love the word fortitude as well. My dad used to coach track when I was in junior high. He was my track coach. And he always talked about running through the finish line, not stopping at the finish line, but running through the finish line. Whether you're a sprinter or a distance runner, if you stopped before the finish line, he was going to get on your case about it. It was a pet peeve of his, but he always talked about intestinal fortitude. Always. He's like, you got to reach down deep and find that intestinal like he'd get all excited about it. But to find that last little push, and that's like that stick it, whatever that stick it mentality is that you could push through a situation or whatever pain, or so it's not just facing danger, the courage that helps you to face danger, but it's that courage that you have to like stick through and be persistent and push through all kinds of different situations. And I always think of intestinal fortitude all the time. I'm like, in my mind, it's like that Holy Spirit in you that helps you find that extra bit of strength when you feel like you're at the end of your rope. You're really not, because you could find that intestinal fortitude. That's something that has stuck with me for years.
Yeah, and he says it right there. He said, you know, guts is perhaps the nearest modern English. So he even puts.
Yeah. And then just before we move on to the next chapter, I love the whole idea. I mean, we hear all the time, do the ends, or people say the ends justify the means. And I don't agree with that. And he says, no, it's not true. The truth is that right actions done for the wrong reason do not help us build the internal quality or character called virtue. And it is this quality or character that really matters. So the ends don't justify the means. It's every little decision that we make that help us grow into a more Christ-like person.
I like
anything
that
else?
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say.
No, go ahead.
I like how it's like you're building something, so it almost is better because it's not saying that you have to be perfect on the first try. That you're like building your way, like with each decision that you make, each just decision, and like each temperate decision, all this stuff. You're building that up so that you can be a more virtuous person.
Yeah, that was a theme in this whole book.
I did like that.
You are becoming. That's the whole point.
Yeah. But I feel like sometimes, especially nowadays, we feel like we have to be right the first time. We have to do it. We have to come in being right. And I'm like, well, you know, it takes practice. Like anything takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that God is patient with us as we work towards that, right? Like I love, Amanda mentioned in the chat, she mentioned the last sentence, and just the start of it is that the point is not that God will refuse you admission to his eternal world if you have not got certain qualities of character. The point is that if people have not got at least the beginnings of those qualities inside them, then no possible external conditions could make a heaven for them. They can not, that is, could make them happy with the deep, strong, unshakable kind of happiness God intends for us. So I think that it's about the process for us and for in God's mind. Like it's about us wanting to have that. And if we're not working towards that, then heaven's not going to be heaven for us. Like that's not, if we don't care about prudence, temperance, justice, or fortitude, then we're not going to care about streets of gold. I'm just kidding.
We're playing harps all day. Playing harps all day. I want to play harps all day.
Yeah, playing harps, right. And laying eggs with the doves. You mentioned that too at some point.
Oh, those are the best.
Yes.
I love it. All right. Chapter 3 talks about social morality. So in relation with other people.
Let me get to that page. Sorry, I was trying to look at a different chapter. Hang on. So this chapter is really interesting. Okay. I did have a summary on this one.
Awesome.
I took so many notes on this one. Okay. Like it's more notes than text. Okay. Okay. If we look at the scriptural model of how a Christian society should run, it would be ruled by the golden rule. Everybody would work or go hungry. They would apply Christian principles to their own vocations. They would live cheerfully and obediently under leadership, and they would give more than they could spare cheerfully to charity. That's it.
Yeah, I think this chapter really focuses on the golden rule and what does that mean and how do we walk it out. Like, that's like the general gist of it, and he gives those examples of giving of money was like the biggest example. Like, how do we take care of our money and give our money. But yeah, it's all about, we want a list of do's and don'ts, and that's just not what we're given. Sometimes it'd be easier to just have a checklist, right? A checklist for morality. I want to be a great person, so what do I need to do? Tell me. A, B, C, D, and E. But that's not what we're given. It's a lot more fluid. It's a lot more subtle sometimes than that.
I love that in this section he says that, yeah, it's not a specific thing that is given to a specific society. It's very much a bunch of principles that everybody is, the pastor is supposed to remind you of these old-fashioned principles. There's nothing new,
right.
which
nothing
I think,
new, yeah.
like Amanda said, and that's what the pastor's supposed to do. He's supposed to remind you of these very old, nothing new principles, and everybody in his own profession is supposed to apply them very specifically. So the economists are supposed to apply them. If all the politicians were Christians, they would apply them and solve all the world problems fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And like, it's just like, oh, it's so convicting. It's like world hunger could just be wiped out pretty quickly if all the politicians were Christians. Like, it's just like, man.
I'm currently reading. Oh, go ahead.
No,
go ahead, Kelly.
Well, I was gonna piggyback on that is that because you're talking at the point where he was saying that, like a pastor or religious leader shouldn't do everything, that everybody has a part. I used to work at a church, and I just remember how many times people would expect the senior pastor to be the administrator, to be the person doing this, like do all these things. And I'm like, that's not what he's here for. You're taking away from his time of being with the parishioners and preparing his sermon. He needs to do those two things, and we all need to support him and do what we have the talent for. Like, that's not his talent to run church or like to go out in the public and do these things. We're supposed to be doing those.
It's important for us to build him up so that he can delegate the tasks and trust that we'll get them done for him, That's what the body's for.
Yeah, we're all part of the body. There's not just like one leader.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I love that he does talk in here somewhat about like politics, like, probably like nobody would be completely happy with what it would look like because we all have our own ideas of what we think it should look like, and it's not completely scriptural. But he doesn't, like, I don't know. Personally, I do have my own like political stuff, but like he's not a politician, so he doesn't like try and lay it all out, So obviously we don't live in an ideal world, and I don't think, we don't live in an ideal world. I don't think an ideal Christian society would work here, unfortunately. If we tried to implement it in America, I don't think it would work here.
Well, even just in this chapter, he gives 3 examples from the New Testament of what a Christian society would be like. No passengers or parasites. I love that. No passengers. Everyone is to work with his own hands, and everyone's work is to produce something good. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's always insisting on obedience from all of us to the people that are in authority over us, whether that's what do they use? Appointed magistrates for children to their parents, from wives to their husbands. We'll skim over that till we get to that chapter. But and then it's to be a cheerful society, full of singing and rejoicing, and regarding worry or anxiety as wrong. I was like, whoa, we are such a society now where every other person struggles with that, and it's like in a legit way. Like, I'm not trying to downplay anyone who says that they have who struggle with that, but those are just 3 examples from the New Testament of what a fully Christian society would look like. And we don't live in that world, so we don't see that.
Right.
But
exactly.
Yeah. But we also can't pick and choose. A little bit later, everyone is attracted to bits and pieces of the Christian faith and want to just kind of, well, I like this part about who God says he is, but I don't really like this. So I'm just gonna skim over that and focus on this. And I hear that from people, and I'm like, oh, that doesn't really work. And I'm not saying that I have it all perfectly nailed down in my mind either, but like, yeah.
It's not a buffet.
No.
I like when he was talking about giving. I put ouch beside this part where he said we should probably give more than we do. If our charities do not at all pinch or hamper us, I should say they're too small. That hurts a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. The only safe thing is to give more than we can afford. It's like,
holy moly.
Yeah.
And when we do give, we give to the things that are like the least really helpful. I mean, tipping, he gives examples of like tipping or hospitality, but the people that really truly need, those people need our stuff, but the people who really truly have a need, we don't give as much there as we could.
What do you think of the last line of this chapter? It says, "For the longest way round is the shortest way home." What do you think that means? That kind of stumped me a little bit.
I kind of stumbled on that too, but what did I decide that it means? Hold on.
I think it means that we always take the longest route to get somewhere, even though we could just do it directly, but we take our time learning our lessons and getting to that point when we could have just taken the short road by just doing what we're supposed to be doing. Instead, we have to stumble down a path of figuring out, well, is this what I'm supposed to do? And, maybe I do this instead. And so our path actually gets widened to get to the same destination. It could be shorter if we stuck to what we are meant to be doing, which is, these Christian, virtues and whatnot. That's what I understood from that piece. I have that underlined as well. But right before that, he just reiterates the "do as you would be done by" piece, and he said, "I can say that to someone until I'm black in the face, but you're really not going to know how to do that until you learn by obeying, the God." So that's how I saw it, was like, you could get there faster if you just do it, but instead you're going to take a long way around.
The Christian way is not the quick way. Which, again, is a theme. By the way, this chat is gold. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
It's moving so quickly.
And I love that you're responding to each other, too. I appreciate that. I've been seeing some of your comments, too. So good.
And everybody, go ahead. There's a lot of people here. Everybody go ahead and like this video while you're watching.
Oh, yeah.
Like the live stream.
I'm here.
And also hello to people who are watching this later. I always forget to do that. But if you're watching this later, because I know a handful of you can't get here on Sundays, but you do watch it later and you'd let me know. So thank you for watching it later and reading along with us. All right, can we move to morality and psychoanalysis?
Yes.
Christy, do you have a summary for this one?
Sorry, yes, I do. And sorry, also, yes, I'm sorry if I was blunt about the liking. If you're enjoying this video, please like it. Kristen did not put me up to that.
Like. Smash it!
Please smash the like if you're enjoying this. Kristen worked really hard on putting this together.
It's so funny. I joke because one of the kids, total sidetrack, but one of the kids that I nanny has a friend who has a YouTube channel, and he's like 10-year-old kid. And he's always trying to get me to like his channel and all that. And I'm sorry, no, dude. But they all watch all those people that talk that way in their videos, like, smash that like. Talk in the comments. I don't know, all that I'm not like high energy. I'm like, no, I don't do that on my video.
Yeah, sorry. I was just like,
do it now.
Do it.
Oh my gosh, Sarah in the comments, hit the like button or repent.
Or repent.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I loved this chapter. I'm bringing it back.
Yeah, this is important. Thank you, Christy. I keep bringing it away. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
All right. I think we're doing pretty good on time, though. Like we're
yeah, we're moving along. We're good.
Yeah, we're moving.
All
But
right.
wait till the next chapter.
Stop.
No,
I'm sorry, my
My Christy,
Don't jinx it, Brady.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
My short summary of this chapter was name drop city. He just kept name dropping. He was like Freud and Jung and Hilmer, and I was like, I've read all those. I know who you're talking about.
That's so funny.
Why are you doing this? And I think it's just because he doesn't really know a lot about psychoanalysis. So he's just like, these people do, and this is what they say.
Yeah.
Well, he and Freud had met a few times.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I talked to Krista about a play that I saw that was about a meeting that they had where I don't know if they both tried to convince each other of their other view, but it was just basically like the two of them hashing out their viewpoints. So, but it was pretty interesting. So I like this chapter too.
That is interesting. Because before reading this chapter, I kind of thought that psychoanalysis and Christianity didn't mix, but he kind of made the separation between. Anyways, okay.
Yeah.
Here's the summary.
Yes. Summary.
Psychoanalysis. Oh dear. Oh dear. I'm sorry. God doesn't hold. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Let me figure it out. Talk for a minute. I did
Talk
have
amongst
one,
yourselves.
but I crossed out a bunch of it, and now
I
it
would
doesn't
say
make sense.
my favorite line from this section was human beings judge one another by their external actions. God judges them by their moral choices. I really liked that.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that made me, I put the verse from David when David was anointed to be king by Samuel. Samuel looked at all the other brothers in David's family. Is like, surely this is the one. Surely this is the one. And God's like, nope, 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 nope. Okay, that little one. And then he says, man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. So it goes right along with that. Like God sees the inside of us that we don't always show to other people, but we can only judge people on their actions, which is why we shouldn't judge people, because we don't always know what's behind all that. And I also thought about, in the Bible, the widow's coin or whatever. Like she gives the Pharisee comes in and gives a huge offering into the temple, and then this widow comes in and puts in 2 pennies basically. And God was like, she's the one that gave a greater offering today. And the disciples are like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, this guy just gave a huge offering. And he's like, yeah, but she gave everything that she had. So we don't know always what is behind our actions or somebody else's actions. We know what's behind our actions, but we don't always know what's behind other people's actions. So being judgmental of them is wrong because we don't always know what's inside or behind it or, yeah. But God does, and he sees it. And he knows.
Yes.
Okay, Christy, you got it?
Okay, I've got it. Yeah, I love yes, exactly what you were saying. So psychoanalysis can help us deal with mental health struggles. God does not hold mental illness or its effects against us morally. Morality and psychoanalysis are separate arenas that we sometimes think conflict, but God that we sometimes confuse, but God never does. That's it.
Yeah, and I
And
like
he clarified,
go ahead,
Sure.
Becca.
he clarified the role of psychoanalysis, how it relates to morality, when he said, moral choices, there's 2 parts to it. There's the raw materials, which are like, your feelings or the things that make you think the way you do. And that's the part that psychoanalysis can affect. And then there's the choice itself involving our free will. So, he kind of defines, here's the part that psychoanalysis can help, but you still ultimately, you have the free will to make the choice you're going to make.
Yes. Exactly.
And I think it was Christina in the comments too. She noted the quote: "Good people know about both good and evil. Bad people do not know about either."
So that was interesting. Kind of goes along with those moral choices, you know, and the ability to make those choices. So
it's almost like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Right? The more you make progress towards becoming a more moral and right, the more right choices you make, the more you realize how far you still have to go. But I love that the idea of like when you don't care to make those right choices, the less you see about how much you need to change. But the more you're changing and becoming more like Christ, the more you see how far you still have to go. Right? So I loved that line too.
Yes. How
every choice changes us. I love this is the chapter that talks about every choice we make either makes us more like a heavenly creature or a hellish creature.
Yes. Oh yeah, I have that whole paragraph underlined, and then like at the end, what is it?
Oh yeah, I think I had that one.
Yeah.
All your life long, you are slowly turning this central thing either into a heavenly creature or into a hellish creature, either into a creature that is in harmony with God and with other creatures and with itself, or into one that is in a state of war and hatred with God and with its fellow creatures and with itself. To be the one kind of creature is heaven. That is, it is joy and peace and knowledge and power. To be the other means madness, horror, idiocy, rage, and impotence, and eternal loneliness. Each of us, at each moment, is progressing to the one state or the other.
Yikes, right? Yikes.
Makes you think twice about your choices.
Yes. Each little choice. The battleground.
Yeah.
I felt like super convicted on the next page, at least my edition, right on the next page, it's talking about anger and how like the one man whose anger happened to like shed the blood of 1,000 is on the like same level as the one that does like the little anger along the way. And I'm just like thinking about, especially during this past year or so, my anger with my kids has like increased, and it's like because once you start like letting a little of that escape, it just like keeps going until you're like, okay, we need to like spin this around. Like this is just like it's adding to that like mark on the soul, is what he's saying. And I felt very convicted by that.
Yeah. Well, and I love, if you think about Jesus' teachings, like he took all of these laws and things that they had for years, centuries, and gave us that inner life connection, right? So the law was thou shalt not murder, but then Jesus was like, but even if you hate your brother, you're killing him ultimately. Like it's the same. He's connecting it because he's bringing it back to like what C.S. Lewis was talking about. It's about that choice that we make on the inside. Yeah, the outward might look different. Like I might not have killed anybody, but that seed of hatred is the same whether I kill someone or if I hate my brother or whatever. Like that seed of the virtue is the same. And so am I going to make, and the choice might then look different in how it walks itself out. But God does not judge him on the raw material, right? The psychoanalysis helps with the raw materials, what we can do with the raw materials we're given. But God doesn't judge on the raw materials, but what we have done with it. So what have we done with the life that we've been given? We've all been given different things to deal with, different people surrounding us, different choices to make every day. And what are we going to do with it?
Well, I don't think it was in this chapter. I think it's in another one, but he makes the example of like, if you don't like somebody, treat them kindly and act like you like them, because sooner it will turn into like, because you are being good to them and because you are being kind and good natured and you're trying to like them, even though you don't, you will eventually begin to like them and be good without telling yourself you're being good. And I think about that one really hit me hard, because sometimes there's people in my life where I'm like, I don't like you. You're really annoying me and I don't want you here. Like you're annoying me. And that really hit home with me, because I was like, but if I thought to myself, I don't like you, but I'm gonna be nice, and I'm gonna, and I'm usually nice, but inside I'm like, I don't like you. So if I could turn off that internal switch of like, just stop, it would, I would, it would be much better.
What Kelly was saying about the kind of once you start down that path, it gets harder. It's like it unleashes something. Like I felt that too. It's so much harder to turn off once it's been turned on. And once you turn it off, it does, like once you've taken that step and turned it off, for me, it does tend to get easier. It's like when I've like it as just like an example it kind of does the same thing, even though it's not quite relevant. At times in my life, I've had to like stop drinking coffee or something for my health. Like once I kind of stop for a while, it's like easier. It's like, oh, I can live without it for a time. You know, once I get past the headaches or whatever. It's like, oh, I can survive. Okay, I'm okay for a while until like people start talking about it and I smell it or something, and then I'm like, oh. But just as an example. But then like once I start drinking it again, it's like I need it. And
I just love though that, I mean, he's going to get into this in the next couple chapters, but we can't do it on our own. It's not something like having this perfect morality that he's talking about with all these virtues. It's not possible to make all the right choices and do it all on our own. Like, thank God he has so much grace and gives us the Holy Spirit to help us. Like, we need God's help to be moral people. Like, we cannot do it on our own. And I think as we go into the next couple chapters, that's something that I pulled out from all of them. Like, we can't conquer our pride on our own. We can't forgive somebody who's hurt us on our own. Like, we absolutely 1000% need God's help. Like, we can have the desire, and sometimes God will take that and run with it, right? Yeah. I think that desire is the first step. I think he even talked about that at some point in here, but all right. So chapter 7, just kidding. Forgiveness.
Wait a second.
I was like, wait, 7. Wait, weren't we like not quite there?
We gotta make, I gotta get to dinner. Okay, so chapter 5 is sexual morality. Do you have a summary of this one, Christy?
I'm sorry, I don't.
That's okay.
Oh, no. She's letting us float on our own now.
Sorry, yeah.
I think without getting too involved in this topic, I think the one thing that I did appreciate from this chapter is in the very beginning where he reminds us that there's a difference between chastity and modesty, because he's acknowledging that different cultures are different things. And the example that he talks about with a Victorian woman and a woman from, like, I think, did he say the Pacific Islands? Because their way of life is different. You know, she may be wearing something that shows a lot more skin other than a Victorian woman where she's like, up to the, top. It's different cultures, different. And so modesty and chastity, I think were interwoven in people's minds. And I like that he broke those two.
Yeah. No. Oh, she froze on the peace sign.
Yeah, she was like, yeah.
Woman, especially in the sense that, I appreciated that. I really did, because I feel like though we can see in his writing, he's dated in a lot of things as far as the difference between men and women. I do appreciate throughout that he does acknowledge the fact that there should be more equality. And I'm talking about during his time. Like, I felt like there were certain things that were like of his time, but then there's other things where he really does talk about equality between men and women. And I really appreciated that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I felt about it too.
I mean, he could only talk about things that he knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he can't see into the future and how we are now. But I think for his time, he had a lot of respect for women. And, like, if you see what his relationship was with his wife, like, they were very you know,
They were
on equal
colleagues.
footing. So
which is very unusual for the time. Very, like unheard of almost from what I can see.
Right. Yeah.
I did. We kind of were just talking about this in the last chapter, but towards the end of this chapter, it just talks about, and I think this can apply to any of the virtues. Very often what God first helps us towards is not the virtue itself, but just this power of always trying again, because we're just going to mess up with whatever it is that we're working on changing within ourselves. And then this process trains us in habits of the soul, which are more important still. It cures our illusions about ourselves and teaches us to depend on God. So I think that applies not just to chastity, as he's talking about in this chapter, but any virtue that we're working on.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, we might think we've got one down, and God's gonna be like, okay, now pick from the next 10 because we got a lot more to work on, right? There's always something to work on.
Well, and he even says here, the sins of the flesh are bad, but they are the least bad of all sins.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Like, he's really not that concerned, I feel like, with this topic. That's why there's not that many, like, for a giant book about what mere Christianity is, so far he hasn't talked about sex very much. Like, it's not in here very much.
Well, and he said he's not going to because he wasn't a married man, you know, and he didn't have he doesn't talk about things he doesn't know a lot about. So
it hasn't been a big deal for him as a Christian. So, you know,
right?
Yeah.
And he was a young man at one point. So, you know.
No, I think he was born. I think he was born a 50-year-old man.
An old soul.
Yeah.
Hey, what's wrong with 50? There's nothing wrong with being 50.
No, there isn't. But I mean, I don't ever think of C.S. Lewis of anything other than like his older self. Like that, I can't think of anything other than that.
Yeah.
Well, like he glosses over a lot when he says, I know it's like really unpopular to be chaste because, you know, and we can definitely attest to this now. Society's gotten even more open about sexuality now. But he's just as like, you know, it's very unpopular to say abstinence is the way until you're married. Yeah. You know, so we'll all make mistakes, but you just try again and do better next time. Yeah. And that's like where he leaves it. And it's like, that covers a lot, you know, as a young person. You'll make mistakes, try again and do better next time. It's like, okay then. That covers a whole lot of young youthful mistakes.
It's so funny.
Another reason that he glosses over some of this is that he said it's not the center of Christian morality. Right. You know, sometimes we put more emphasis on it than it should have, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
No.
It's not the most important thing.
Which is why we're going to move right on.
These kinds of mistakes. Yeah.
This is important stuff.
This is like, we're done.
It's funny to me because he's writing this as a not married man, but his chapter on Christian marriage is the longest one in this section. I'm like, come on, CS. Come on. And I didn't underline too much. I mean, I liked the difference of being like, love is a choice and not that feeling of being in love. I mean, that's not something that I haven't heard a zillion times.
You know, I feel like I don't know if maybe it's just because it's so close to I've just read this, but like when I was reading through that piece, the being in love versus loving someone, for me being someone who is recently married, that really hit home for me. Like it really made me think about like the long haul. And I think what he said about how some are so
man.
Oh no.
Of making something that could easily just happen. For me, I'm like, no, I'm married for life. And that's not a common thought. It's not a common thought anymore. And it wasn't here either. Like divorce is an option. And I, understandably so, I'm not against divorce. Obviously there are people that it needs to happen. For me, that's not my plan. And that's not my intention. And I feel like when he speaks about the love, it really made me think about, you know,
when things get rough, my plan is always to figure that out and to find where that love, binds that, friction back together so that you can move forward. So I really appreciate that piece in that chapter.
Yeah. I loved his description of what love is. And he says it's a deep unity maintained by the will, deliberately strengthened by habit, reinforced by the grace which both partners ask and receive from God. I thought that was such a good description of the choice that love is, and not just that in love feeling. And I love as he talks about thrills, he's like, if you decide to make thrills your regular diet and try to prolong them artificially, they will all get weaker and weaker and fewer, and you will be a bored, disillusioned old man for the rest of your life.
I loved that too. Yeah. That's really interesting. This may be a bit of a red herring. Well, as a writer, I don't know. As somebody who spent a lot of time among writers, a lot of writers spend a lot of time kind of chasing that writing high, kind of trying to chase their fancy or their inspiration. And they're always chasing that and hoping that it will carry them through a project. And I feel like it's a really similar concept. Eventually, you have to settle down and realize it's going to be some hard work to carry you through that novel. The fairy, as Neil Gaiman says, the fairies are not going to write your novel for you. You got to write it yourself. So it's kind of a similar concept. Yeah, I just love that concept. You got to settle down and find the real joy in life. Eventually, you'll find it, but you got to settle down. Be an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, as someone that's been married for 12 years,
congrats.
I'm surprised he hasn't been married, because some of these things I was like, yeah, my husband and I talk about this all the time. The section where he's talking about people get from a lot of novels and movies, plays, that falling in love is irresistible. And so if you're married and you see somebody that you have this connection with and you're attracted to, you think, oh, I must have been meant to be with that person instead of the person I had chosen. I'm like, well, that's not true. You have made the choice. You had that spark with the person you married. You made that choice, and you have to nurture that spark and that joy. And like Chrissy said, you find the joy in where you're at each stage of your marriage. And then if some shiny thing comes in, you can go, I can recognize that person is attractive and that I would have a connection with them. But I'm going to choose not to have that person in my life because I've already made this choice. And with my marriage, Yeah. So I thought he was pretty insightful as somebody that has not been married.
Yeah, I did too. At that part you were talking about, our seasons of marriage out at the side. You go through those, we're so in love at the beginning and everything's wonderful. And then, you hit these other troughs and the feelings don't stay that, newlywed feelings. And it's not because you married the wrong person. It's just because that's a season.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move us into forgiveness. Is that all right?
I was very afraid of this chapter. I know that this is one of my biggest things. I'm really, that saying "forgive and forget" kind of thing. I'm really tough on that. So I was as soon as this chapter, because I've started to read the chapter headings since our last discussion. Yeah. And I was like, ooh, this one's going to be a tough one for me.
Yeah. I love that he starts right out. He's like, this might be even more unpopular than Chastity.
Well, Dana, you know what he said? The first step to all of the things is knowing. So you're obviously making progress.
I'm ahead of the game.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, Rainy's phone died, so she's going to stay in the comments.
Oh, Rainy.
Sorry, Rainy. We miss you already.
Yes.
I was a little bit afraid of this one too until I started to read it, and then I actually felt better about it. When he's talking about forgiving your enemies, he said, start small. Like, okay, I can start small. That's easy. And then when he said that something along the lines of loving your enemies doesn't mean you think they're nice, I thought, oh, good, because that's hard. You know, I was always under the impression, or in my mind, I thought, okay, if I forgive that person, I have to like them. And I don't really have to like them. I just don't like, it's not them I don't like, it's the things they do that I don't like. You know, there's a distinction. And I think about with my kids, you know, I love my kids. I don't always love their choices. Yeah. And I think it's kind of the same thing. I can love my enemy, but I don't have to love the things they do. So that made me feel a little bit better about it, that maybe I'm not as far off as I thought I was sometimes.
Yeah, I love that connection to love your neighbor as yourself. Is right up there with love your enemy. Like, loving your enemy means loving your neighbor as yourself. And so he talked about how we can still love ourselves and take care of ourselves, even if we don't always love the choices that we make ourselves.
Right.
But we still don't like shut down. Like, we still get up and eat breakfast the next day and take care of ourselves, like take a shower and brush our teeth. Like, we still do things that show that we are caring for ourselves, even if we don't always love the choice. Like, even if we have regrets about the things that we did. And so that applying that same thing, like, you can still treat others like humans and care for them in a way, but still not always agree with, like what you were saying, with the choices that they made. Being sorry that the man should have done such things, and hoping, if it is any way possible, that somehow, sometime, somewhere, he can be cured and be made human again. That's extreme. Somehow, somewhere, sometime. I didn't really understand anything in this chapter.
How did you guys feel about the towards the end of the chapter where he starts to talk about killing versus murder? How did that land on you? I understood where he was talking about how, like, the Greek puts it, like, we read it as kill in the scripture, but the Greek translation is actually murder. But how did that last piece land on you, as far as, like, was he saying, like, it's okay to, like, kill? I mean, I know it was wartime, so he's trying to, like, let people know it's okay to, you know, kill men during war.
As a soldier who had killed person in wartime, also a Greek scholar, I'm sure. I don't know. I'm not sure. Also, I only got to listen to this part. I didn't take notes. I feel like I can't offer an opinion very well on that one. It's like,
yeah, it was weird for me.
Depends on how you feel about, like, the death penalty. But I think he's saying there's a difference between a serial killer and somebody who has received the death penalty as a consequence for an action that they have. That those two things are not the same. And so one, yeah, I don't know. I didn't think too deeply about that either.
I also have to think that, wasn't this a radio show during World War II? So, I mean, and they just had World War I. So there's probably a lot of people with PTSD that it wasn't defined as PTSD, that were dealing with those feelings of having killed someone. And so I think for him, having been in the war and like you said, Chrissy, possibly having killed someone, like, I think there was probably a lot of people at that time that were dealing with those feelings. And so I think he's probably trying to give some comfort that, like, that there is a difference between fighting a war and going out and killing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it depends on your feeling of war, but at the time they were going through 2 world wars in a row, which, you know, I don't know. I haven't been alive during the world wars.
Can we move to Pride?
Oh, I have a summary on that one.
Okay, good. Chapter.
All right. Pride is the source of all other sins and miseries. It is the anti-God state of mind. Because if all you can think of is yourself, you will never truly see that God is superior. Humility is a relief and a pleasure to all around that person. That's it.
Yeah. Pride is like a doozy. Because I think it's such a universal struggle, whether you realize it or not. Because, I mean, we talked about it earlier with talking about selfishness. He talked a lot about being selfish towards the beginning of this book, and ultimately what that shakes down to is pride. And it does lead to everything else. So you may not deal with desires of killing somebody, but you're going to deal sometime with comparing yourself to others and thinking yourself better. At some point in your life, that's just going to happen. And I enjoy my competitive nature. When it comes to like playing board games, volleyball, like I'm prideful about the fact that I'm competitive and I love to win. But in the sense of like competitive, comparing ourselves by nature to other people, like it rolls into that too. Like it happens. It's I almost said it's natural. It's not a natural thing, but it happens. And yeah, this chapter was pretty convicting for me, to be honest.
There's gotta, yeah, he didn't really, did he make a distinction between like games and stuff like that? I don't think he did, but I'm sure there's a distinction in there between like games and stuff like that. Because like competitions and stuff are like healthy, I think.
Sure,
you know?
Sure. But I think when he says, I think someone just put it in the chat too, pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than someone else. And so that attitude of like, even when I find a title in a book and I'm like, yes, I won. Like that mentality of like trickles into relationships sometimes too. And I don't even realize it. But he said earlier, just before, other vices are competitive only by accident, but pride is like competitive by nature. Like that's what it is. It's a comparison of yourself to someone else.
Okay, yeah. So he talks about how pride cannot have like friends around you, whereas other vices can. But competitive sports is like you can have friends. Yes. So I guess that there's the difference.
There is a difference.
Yeah, and that's the part I highlighted too, was what you said, where, you know, a bunch of people drinking can be all like, you know, buddy, but you can't be all like hanging out together being prideful, because then you're all gonna be angry with each other.
Yeah.
And right after that he says how, and this was like the part that like was my favorite part, when he's like, you know, as long as you're proud, you cannot know God. A proud man is always looking down on things and people. And as long as you're looking down, you cannot see something that is above you. And I was like, oh, yeah. We can't see God because we're like, I'm better than you down here. But we should be like paying attention.
Looking up. Yeah. So good with the illustrations. So good.
Yeah.
But I like how he reminds us too that being praised for something, we shouldn't feel bad about that, because it, you know, that's still good. So it's like, oh, okay. I think because the word proud is part of pride, it gets, when we say, oh, we're so proud of, I think his example is like of a child, like you say you're proud of them. What you really mean, and I think he said something about admiration, like you just really admire what they've done, and you're, you know, but we just use the word proud to categorize that feeling.
Okay, Amy Bowman just put, competitive sports is a friendly competition! ! That's why they shake hands at the end! ! I feel like that could have been like another one of those. Number 4, another thing that gets misunderstood is...
Yeah. And I always laugh when you think about humility, not laugh. But Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, and in there somewhere, it's like, Moses was such a humble man. I'm like, okay, but you wrote that.
Are you really, though?
Oh, that's awesome.
I always laugh when I read that. I'm like, okay, Moses, we got it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
God won't notice this little interjection here.
Oh man.
My favorite quote in this section is when he's talking about that, pride isn't forbidden to us because God's worried about himself. It's because it prevents us from knowing him. And he says, he's trying to make you humble in order to make this moment possible, trying to take off a lot of silly, ugly, fancy dress in which we have all got ourselves up and are strutting about like the little idiots we are. Like, if that doesn't knock your pride down a little bit, nothing will.
Yeah.
I mean,
goodness.
Just tells it like it is.
I love it.
So true. There's so much good stuff in this.
Mm-hmm. I like at the end where he's like talking about when our vision of a humble man is probably not the reality. The reality, if you met a really humble man, you would just see somebody that's happy and cheerful, and you wouldn't necessarily like associate that that's a humble man, but that's like the result, that you are happier because you're like earlier you talking about you're happy because you're connected with God, so that comes out in that way. Yeah, I'm not very eloquent. Read what you wrote.
No, because I think like that whole idea of looking down. When we're looking down, we're not looking towards God. We're looking at our own situation, and I noticed that even my own life, like maybe not necessarily as relation to pride, but when I'm getting so caught up in my own emotions of whatever situation I'm dealing with or whatever, I often can recognize or later recognize that my eyes were only just on my own situation. As soon as I look up, even to help somebody else or have a conversation with somebody else, or even beyond that, like look up and like get back in God's word or spend time with God, like immediately my situation that seemed like such a big deal is not such a big deal anymore. I always notice that when I go on a flight and you go up in the air, I always have like these spiritual epiphanies, right? Like, look how minuscule we are. It just helps to have perspective. And I think that's what you're talking about there. Like when somebody who's truly humble, because they're not thinking about themselves all the time. They're not focused on their own needs and wants and desires all day long. They're thinking about other people and they're thinking about God. And so there is so much more joy in that when you're not so focused on yourself.
And when he described the humble man at the end, I was like, is that me? Like, if somebody like was hanging out with me, is that what they would see? Like, yikes. Would they see like a pleasant person that was just thinking about them? Like, oh my gosh. So convicting.
Yeah.
I like the very last line of the chapter where it says, if you think you are not conceited, it means that you are very conceited indeed. Because it reminds me, I think that happens a lot in like just normal stuff. It's like, if we're talking about something and you don't think it's you, it's you.
Oh, man. Okay, we need to move on. I have 20 minutes.
Okay.
So we're going to move on to charity. So now we can do 9 and 10, and then like 11 and 12 kind of go together because they're both about faith. So we'll tackle 11 and 12 together. But now we're moving away from the cardinal virtues and into the theological virtues, as he calls them: faith, hope, and love. Ultimately, starts with love.
Yes, excellent. I have a summary for charity and hope, but not for the faith chapters.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, so charity. Charity, if we leave aside the element of forgiveness, is love in the Christian sense. It is an affair of the will, whether directed towards man or towards God. Even if we don't feel it, we must practice it. We will begin to feel it. We will begin to like people. And the most important thing is that God likes us. He loves us and is never indifferent toward us. That's the end. Sorry about the pauses. It's me deciphering my handwriting.
Fine. Totally fine. I loved, like, that was probably most definitely my favorite sentence in this chapter was that ending part. The great thing to remember is that though our feelings come and go, his love for us does not. It is not worried by our sins or our indifference, and therefore it is quite relentless in its determination that we should be cured of those sins at whatever cost to us, at whatever cost to him. I just want to thank you, God. I like literally wrote that. Thank you, God. Because
yes,
it's all about, like, we are told to kind of fake it till you make it. And then we talked about that earlier, Becca. I think you were talking about that. Like, just act as if you did love somebody, and then that feeling will come after. But God doesn't have to do that with us because he just does. He just loves us. He's not worried about our sin. He's not worried about our failures. He's not worried about the times when we're indifferent or not taking the time to be with him. He just straight loves us and wants us to be cured of those things and will pay the price to help that happen to us. And he did pay the price already. So I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus.
Yes. That whole last
Side
paragraph
note-
is just like, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, mine's a side note. Mine doesn't have anything to do with this. Go ahead.
I just love that whole last paragraph is like, God, on the whole, God's love is just a much safer topic
than our love for him. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I know we talked earlier about that point that he makes in here is if you start actually, acting like you love your neighbor, you will love them. But I also like how he says the opposite, that if you injure somebody, you will start disliking them. And just think about that. Like, if you even just accidentally say something hurtful to somebody, then all of a sudden you maybe cut them out or not want to talk to them again or treat them, ignore them because you're feeling shameful of what you did. And so you're like, well, I'm just not gonna so it's like you're breeding more of that.
Yeah, he says good and evil both increase at compound interest.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're feeding the good, then that's going to grow. If you're feeding the negative, then that's going to grow.
Yes. And that religion needs to be fed.
Mm-hmm.
That might have been a later chapter. Sorry.
See. I don't know. What was your side note, Danny, as we move into hope?
Oh, a series I read on audiobook by C.J. Archer, which is the Glass and Steel series. There's a group of sisters that are in that book that are Hope, Charity, and Faith.
Oh, fun.
They are not what their names suggest.
That's funny. I mean, I feel like we've kind of talked about some of this chapter already, but was there anything else from this charity chapter that we need to catch before we move on?
Nope.
Cool. I love hope.
All right. So, this is the second theological virtue. Christians are meant to hope for heaven. Aim at heaven, and you will get earth thrown in. Aim at earth, and you will get neither. You can't find heaven on earth, only echoes meant to grab your attention and make you aware of what's to come. Our main job is to press on to that more, to heaven, and to help others do so as well. I love this chapter.
I know. I love that. And it kind of goes along with that whole perspective thing, too, that we were just talking about with pride. Like, having a perspective of this world is not the end. Like, we're not done here. Another phrase that my dad passed away like 20 years ago. So there's not too many memories that have stuck through. I mean, there's some, but another phrase that my dad said all the time was, in the light of eternity, does this really matter? Like, in the light of eternity, like, let's think about this in the light of eternity. He just would always say that, in the light of eternity. And it helps me. Like, I remember that now all the time. And okay, in the light of eternity, is this thing that I'm freaking out about going to matter? No. Okay, let's just take a breather, like, deal with it in the way that we need to deal with it, but recognize that in the light of eternity, it's not that big of a deal or whatever. It just has helped me so much to have that phrase as like a constant reminder that this world is not my home. There's something more beyond here.
that has been a comfort to many people throughout the ages. It always gets me. Listen, I was listening to the John Adams biography by David McCullough recently, and when Abigail Adams, his wife, died, he was like, well, this is not the worst separation we've had, because they spent so much time apart during their lives while he was working to found America. And he's like, we've been apart longer, we'll soon be in heaven together. And she's like, they sacrificed so much while they were on earth that they're going to be like, it was such a mind-blowing moment for me when he actually said that at her death. Well, this is actually easier than when I went to France. Oh gosh.
I loved the idea. I don't have like a specific quote, but that whole idea of that little moment of longing before some activity or whatever that then will fade away in the reality of whatever it is we're doing. But that moment of like, oh yes, or of like that anticipation, or that like all of that speaks to eternity. Like all of that speaks to heaven, that kind of feeling we just get a little glimpse of, or a little grasp at it. I just thought, I loved that idea. And we kind of have this idea like it didn't quite live up to what we were hoping for, but it will eventually live up to what we're hoping for. But that little moment of longing or anticipation, I just love that idea.
I love that he breaks people down into 5 kind of people. There's like the people who don't even who don't even really grasp that there's a thing, that there is such a thing as hope. Then there's people who get mad at other people for keeping them from what they hope for. Then there's people who are resigned that, hope it doesn't really exist. You just can't really have it. Then there's Christians who know that eventually you can get it.
Yeah. And
then there's people who they just laugh at it, I don't remember. Yeah, I guess there's 4. 4? But I don't know. Anyways, yeah. I love that you broke it down like that.
Yeah.
So good. And in this chapter, he kept doing the premise thing, and then the example thing, and then the conclusion.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was great. Great chapter.
I like the line that you brought up, Kristen, when you were reading last night with the answer to such people is that if they cannot understand books written for grown-ups, they should not talk about them. I love when you read that because I can't wait to get to that part.
I wrote mic drop in the I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And I love how he breaks down some of the imagery of heaven too. Like I probably haven't heard of it described in these ways before, but I love the idea of instruments are mentioned because for a lot of people, music is the thing which most strongly suggests infinity or ecstasy. Crowns are mentioned to suggest that those who are united with God share his splendor and power and joy. Gold is mentioned for the timelessness of heaven because gold does not rust or get destroyed. The preciousness. I loved that breakdown of some of those heavenly images.
Yeah.
He says, people who take those symbols literally might as well think that when Christ told us to be like doves, he meant that we were to lay eggs.
That was pretty funny.
Oh man, I love it.
This makes the continual looking forward to an eternal world is not a form of escapism or wishful thinking, but something that a Christian is meant to do. This always makes me happy because this is why I read fantasy and science fiction. And I think this is why some people get involved in politics. It's like a kingdom thinking, kind of forwarding the kingdom. But that's why I do read fantasy and science fiction. It just gives me that feeling. It's like something otherworldly. It just really takes me out of this world. And I think that's what Tolkien was talking about when he was writing on fairy stories, thinking of something outside this world.
Mm-hmm. And I love that he's like, it doesn't mean that we can't enjoy and be thankful for the blessings and the good things that we have here. Just recognize that these are just like a taste of what is to come, right? Earthly pleasures were never meant to fully satisfy us, but only to arouse this feeling of longing for something more. So they shouldn't. So I must take care never to despise or be unthankful for these earthly blessings, but also never to mistake them for the something else, which they are only a copy of, or a kind of copy, or an echo, or a mirage. Cool. Faith? I feel like I wasn't fully present during these chapters. Someone said that these two were their most meaningful ones of the section, and I was like, ooh, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't do much in these last two.
Pride got me.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
These were the only 2 chapters I didn't read twice because I ran out of time. And I found that if
Me
I don't
too.
read it twice, I don't get it enough.
all right, Becca, it's all you.
Yeah, and right before I was going to look these over, my mom came over and was
Oh, no.
visiting. And I tried to, I have to do my live here in about 45 minutes, but
I have stuff underlined. I just didn't like.
Rainey, how's your phone?
Well, I think the main point of these 2 chapters is you have the 2 different like definitions of faith. So you have faith as in, where the first sense where it's like just the belief, the accepting and regarding as true doctrines of Christianity. And then the second piece is, actually attempting to practice that. So one is the, like, I don't want to use the word ideal because we already know that that's not what we're thinking, but like the first is the concept and the second is the practice. So it's interesting that he broke that up into 2 chapters as opposed to what he was doing previously, where he would just talk about it in the same chapter. Because I think what that shows is the significance in those 2 pieces. The piece of this is your belief, and this is the way you would read into that faith. And it's a battle between reason and emotion, is what he says. And then that second piece is practicing it and battling between the doing that you're doing in that practice.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this before, but one must train the habit of faith. In this is the first chapter of it. Like, you can know what you believe, but you have to be constantly bringing that to mind, not just leaving it to your pastors or leaders. Like he said in another chapter, like the main job of a pastor or a leader is to continually remind us of these virtues. But here it's like you have to deliberately, if you have once accepted Christianity, then some of its main doctrines shall be deliberately held before your mind for some time every day. That's why daily prayer and religious readings and church going are necessary parts of the Christian life. We have to be continually reminded of what we believe. It must be fed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't automatically remain, what do you say? Neither this belief nor any other will automatically remain alive in the mind. It must be fed. So we have to continually feed our faith in order for us to continue to hold on to it. Because otherwise, every emotion or wind or situation that comes and blows at us. And I think of, so going back to when my dad passed away, I was a senior in college. And it was the most faith-shaking event that had happened in my life. I didn't know anyone who had passed away until my dad passed away. And he was a pastor. I grew up in a pastor's home. Like, I have loved Jesus my whole life. And I always think there's a picture of like a painting that I used to see where a lighthouse is on this rock in the middle of the sea, and the sea is wild and crazy around this lighthouse. And I'm like, I felt like that. Like, I knew I was standing on a rock, but everything around me was like blowing and shaking and trying to knock me off the rock. Ultimately, that's what it felt like. And I had to go back and like reevaluate, who do I truly believe God is? Do I still believe all these things about God? And I had to, yes, I did. Like, I came to the conclusion, yes, I do still believe that God is real. But I know that when people have those faith-shaking events happen in their life, they don't always come to that conclusion. But I think it's when you're continuing to feed it on a consistent basis by reading the Bible and going to church and having conversations with other believers and reading books like this that help keep faith in the forefront of your mind. When those events then happen, even though it might be crazy and might shake you, it's not gonna totally derail your faith, because you've been feeding it, and it's a stronger creature than you might even know until you have to walk through something that can be as devastating as that. But that's just the picture that I thought of with this chapter. Like,
that's really excellent example.
What I liked in the second faith chapter was where it was talking about we have to come to a point where we finally acknowledge that, whatever I'm trying to do, and I try and I try and I try and I try, and finally I just have to admit I can't do this myself. You do it. And to have the faith that he can do anything that I can't do.
Mm-hmm.
And I also liked when he talked about works and faith and how heaven can't be bought, but that works and faith have to work together. You can't have one or the other. It has to work together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead, Christy.
I was just gonna say, Christina from Knitting Books, etc., just put a quote about faith. If what you call your faith in Christ does not involve taking the slightest notice of what he says, then it is not faith at all. And I think that goes into what Krista was saying about feeding your faith. I was just reading a book that, kind of purports to have some religious talk in it. And one of the things one of the characters says is, I believe the same thing that those people over in that church believe. I just don't believe you can find it in a building, which is one of those things that people say, and it sounds so real and good. But it's like, but you can, though. And if you read the Bible, you would know that God says to meet together with people. And if God's people are in a building, you can find God in a building, because that's where God is. So
right.
I just,
I love how Miss Lee words it. You can have faith that, and also faith in. So I believe that God exists, but it's my faith in God that changes us from just a believer of his word to a doer of his word. I love that. There's a little distinction there.
Very well put.
Yeah. Nice. And I like, handing there's a couple quotes on here that I like, but the difficulty, and this is what you were talking about, Becca, is to reach the point of recognizing that all that we have done and can do is nothing. And so it ultimately comes down to trusting God to help us. But then he also says, handing everything over to Christ does not mean that you stop trying. To trust him means, of course, trying to do all that he says, but just in a less worried way. Kind of combined quotes there. But yeah. It's like the paradox of work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And then the second half, that verse continues on, for it is God who works in you. So it's like, work out your salvation, but it's actually God who's working in you to do that. Cool.
And then there were 4.
Oh, we lost Becca again. Oh man, guys, we did it. My goal was 5:40, and
we made it.
It takes
mostly because we skipped the last 2, but yeah.
We talked about it a little bit.
We did it.
Oh, there's Becca. Let me get her back in here.
I'm gonna have to go back and read those physically, because I find that I like listening to it and absorbing it, like on the air. But then I need to go back and see and highlight, and it really does make a difference of like absorbing it.
Yeah. I love it. I appreciate you guys so much. I love hearing what stands out to you and your thoughts on things. And in the comments too, you guys are like the real rock stars today. You guys had so many good points, and I really appreciate everybody participating. This has been such a cool experience reading it as a group. I love it.
Thank you, Krista. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, dinner is with my family that I nanny for. It's like my goodbye dinner, because I only have Monday and Wednesday with them, and then I'm done. And it's been 3 years. So they invited me to come to dinner tonight as like a little thank you. Steak and potatoes. I'm very excited. But
yum.
You guys are awesome. I will see you next week. I'll be in a different location because I'll be in Pennsylvania, but I'm still planning to hop on. So you'll see a different background, but my mom might make an appearance. I don't know if she's been reading it. She's read it before. I don't know if she's reading it right now. I'll try to make her read the last section so she can join in. for a minute. She probably won't the whole time. She's like, I'll just go read in the other room. So, yeah. But you guys are awesome. I hope that you have a wonderful week. And
thank you
all for today.
For having us.
This was excellent. Thank you.
So good. And sorry if it feels like we kind of flew through. I feel like we could have probably talked for like 2 more hours about like every section. I feel like that. Like there's just so much, but we did good.
You did great. No, we did good. I was totally kidding.
All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you for participating. I'm ending the live. Bye, friends.
Bye.